Okay, that's the trade policy evolution and FTA policies and the implication of our FTA network. Now I move into the last subject, which is not very long, but I want to talk about the current world trade environment. What about the future global trade governance, things like that. And finally, I want to conclude what kind of role Korea can play. Using this topic, I can spend hours, because why U.S. and China is fighting to each other, why Trump is doing unilateral actions, not respecting, WTO. There are many, many things to discuss. Actually, I went to China, Beijing on Monday. We have an annual meeting called Trilateral Commission meeting. What do we mean by Trilateral Commission? Trilateral Commission meeting was created in 1971, long time ago. At that time, think about, many people before you were born, I was in college at the time. Why trilateral? Europe, United States, and what? And Japan. These are the trilateral commission at the time. At that time, there's no EU, maybe EC or whatever. So Europe, United States, and in Asia, Japan was the second largest economy already. So they are meeting to talk about the management of the world economy. This is between private citizens, not government officials or former government officials. So history, Trilateral Commission started in early 70s. We still have Trilateral Commission meeting, but participants are hugely changed. EU, in the Europe, they call EU. EU covers 28 countries, almost every country there. What about US? Not US, it's America, Canada, Mexico, so whole America. And Asia, Japan is not the only country anymore. And then Korea was, of course, there. And then China, ASEAN, even Australia want to join to represent Asian group. So this bunch of people meeting annually, plenary meeting, but each region, Asia, Europe, America, they have their own regional meeting. So last week, this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have a Trilateral Commission regional meeting hosted by China. So we went there, many discussions, but what should be the most important discussion? Trade war between China and United States, and when this will be ending, all kind of stories. But anyway, many people are pointing out we have a world economic crisis several times in the 1930s, but you don't have to go that back. 1997, Asia has a financial crisis. We call East Asian financial crisis. Just this crisis is limited to Asia, including Thailand, Korea, things like that. 2008, even bigger crisis starting from United States. It's a global financial crisis. Okay, now 2018. It's very interesting. 1997, we have a financial crisis, East Asian financial crisis. 2008. How many years between? 11 years. So many people think that every 10 years we may have a crisis. So now 2018, we have a crisis in 2008, now 2018, maybe 2019, maybe we'll have another crisis. But this crisis is not coming from East Asia, is not coming from financial sector, is coming from trade sector. Trade disputes already create a lot of uncertainties. So you can remember the stock price of the major companies is tumbling and fluctuating, and foreign direct investments are hesitating where you want to go. You go to China or Vietnam, very, very, very uncertain. So international trade uncertainty create a lot of uncertainties for investors, and foreign direct investment means real investment, but what about the real, the stock investment, financial investment is also hesitant. So many people in Beijing are concerned if China and U.S. trade war doesn't end soon, then maybe trade is triggering another global economic crisis. So they are all worried about that, and already some symptoms are happening. In other words, foreign exchanges are fluctuating, and stock market is hurting, and foreign companies who have a plan to invest in certain countries are, changing their mind whether we have to do that or wait. So we are now in a very, very, very strange and very dangerous crisis kind of situation. This kind of uncertain world, the best way is to study. Don't go to the work because real world is still uncertain. Studying is very good preparation for the for the future for yourself, I guess. So current trade environment is confusing and creating a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability. So you know that the U.S. suddenly imposed tariffs on many goods, especially imports from China, arguing that China violate international rules based on U.S. law, especially U.S. Trade Act, Section 301, which is saying you have to give penalties for those countries which are violating intellectual property rights. So United States, based on Section 301, investigated whole 1 year, 2017 to early 2018, and got the conclusion that China actually steal the intellectual property rights. They forced their companies to give technologies and lots of bad things, That's their own evaluation using their own law, and especially these actions are hurting U.S. security. So President Trump, after this kind of investigation, start to impose tariff of 25% on $60 billion of imports from China. Later, he expanded to $200 billion. He's thinking about expanding into maybe $400 billion. He didn't do it yet, but half of the imports from China now facing 25% tariff or 10% tariff. And China is not sitting doing nothing. They are also retaliating by imposing tariff on U.S. products. So many people are saying that actual trade damages are not that big. Still some complaints, but it creates a lot of uncertainty. It is affecting much more negatively to financial market, foreign direct investment decision, foreign exchange market. They are being affected. But so far, trade damages are not that big. But I'm an economist. But according to my own judgment, even though trade damages are limited, if this expanded or if it lasts longer, then both U.S. and China will be really hurt domestically. Think about it this way. China export to the U.S. China's total export is 19% of China's GDP, total export. Out of this total export, 19% are going to United States. So if you multiply this, maybe 3.6% of GDP is being affected. You should produce less. You are not exporting very much. So Chinese companies, which include foreign companies too, they are affected, negatively affected. Then what? Their production will be reduced. Investment will be reduced. Then you will hire less laborers. Unemployment will be taking place. And price goes up. What about the United States? U.S. imports from outside is only 13% of GDP, total import, not much imports. But out of that, 22% are coming from China. It's not a small number. If you multiply this to about 2 point some percentage of total GDP. And think about this way, US consumers are facing high prices, particularly US companies which are making some manufacturing items by using parts and components imported from China. They are facing high prices. So their international competitiveness will be going down. And inflation is increasing. So US is also hurting. So in the textbook, we say that retaliation after retaliation among countries, then we all lose. We means, first of all, bilaterally you lose. We call lose-lose case. Especially international trade, free trade is a win-win case. But exactly opposite. You lose-lose case, but at the same time, you are affecting other countries. And then world economy. Why other countries? Because China cannot export to US easily. That means you used to import a lot of parts and components from Korea, Vietnam, other countries. You don't import parts from other countries. For example, Korea's huge export to United States, to China, 78.9%, almost 79% are parts and components. And our companies, which is producing in parts and components, will be directly hurt. So maybe bilaterally to hurt each other, and then neighboring countries, world economy in terms of trade, but later, world economy. Why? As I already told you, stock market is doing like this, foreign direct investment is also drifting, and foreign exchange market is not stable, then you may have a crisis. And at the same time, if the US raise the interest rate, what about the companies and the countries, developing countries, which has a huge foreign borrowing, interest rate goes up, then you will be going bankrupt. So we are in a very, very gloomy situation. So at the end, I said that we are currently facing most challenging world trade environment since the World War II. So we are in a very serious kind of situation. Okay. So if you go to many conferences, simply, we know that this trade war is serious, but more people are criticizing Trump. I mean, Trump's action, unilateral action, based on Section 301, based on his own security, according to our multilateral trading rules, it's not good. Okay, so that's wrong. Or sometimes you can criticize Trump, but the main substance President Trump is raising concerning not only other countries but mainly China is very serious one. The substance of the disputes is what? Violating, stealing intellectual property right, and forcing foreign companies to transfer their own technology. Otherwise, you are not accepting the foreign direct investment. And also what? You are heavily giving subsidies, government subsidies to the companies for many industries, production subsidies, export subsidies, which is distorting international trade flow. So normally, to monitor, to challenge this kind of aspects should be done through multilateral dispute settlement process. But US is skipping multilateral process and just directly attacking China. So, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is here, the issues are very important, but the approaches, I don't like it very much. Unilateral approaches are not very good. You have to respect the multilateral trading system, but still, US is thinking that multilateral trading system, WTO, is really weakened, is not properly working, because we started some kind of negotiations called Doha round in 2001. It never happened this way before, but after 17 years, we couldn't conclude because of the weak mechanism of the WTO. So that's why Trump is skipping or ignoring or disrespect World Trade Organization. But in any case, just unilateral action because of based on your power, I don't like it very much. But we must not forget they are raising the valid, important issue for international trade. In other words, depending upon the development stages, but you have to provide so-called level playing field, fair competition, okay? And you have to abide by multilateral rules. I mean, if somebody raised this issue, you cannot reject this issue. This is a very, very important issue, but many people agree that the approach U.S. is taking is too much, too unilateral. You are ignoring multilateral trade organizations or multilateral trade rules. So here, I said that to some extent, President Trump's action is a reminder to all of us the importance of level playing field, especially what intellectual property right and more transparent investment policies, and technology transfer should be fair, and also the subsidies, export subsidies should not be excessively provided. So we have to do something about this. But anybody can raise the issue and ask your trading partner, you should change it. But you do that through dispute settlement process of the WTO. But you are not supposed to do bilaterally or unilaterally, which is not very good. So that's why we are fighting to each other. U.S. is doing action, and then China retaliate, and it's kind of continuous. So what happened? So at the moment, you have to think about this. At the moment, I didn't say this here. Have you heard about G20? G20 meeting? It's the most important, not only advanced, but developing countries, which include Korea too. So you name it, all important countries, major countries are meeting together annually, the leaders. We call G20 Summit. It started in 2008, right after the global financial crisis. President Bush, immediately formed kind of G20. And then since then, we are annually meeting this kind of thing. So Trump and Xi Jinping went to APEC meeting in Papua New Guinea and Singapore, but Mr. Trump didn't go there. He sent his vice president, Pence. So Xi Jinping and Trump didn't meet yet over the few months. And then the G20 meeting will be held in Buenos Aires, Argentina, on November the 30th. So that meeting, Xi Jinping and Trump is going. And lots of news are coming out. Some working level people are discussing about the possible negotiations or possible discussions between Xi and Trump. So in Beijing, many people are saying that very cautiously, it's not very optimistic, but cautiously, if these two gentlemen meet in Buenos Aires, I told you, this trade war, nobody wants to lose, but if you continue for long, both of them will be hurt, okay? Actually, the trade war started in, I actually count this date, July 6th. Lots of rhetorics are over there. July 6th, the day they start to impose actual tariffs, 25%. So actual trade war started in July the 6th. As an economist, you cannot have this trade war over a year. I mean, if you do that for a year, then you really hurt each other, okay? So how many months? About July, maybe 4 or 5 months. So I thought maybe sometime early next year, January or February, as far as trade, tariff retaliation war should be ended. Otherwise, you hurt to each other. You hurt your own people, you hurt your own company. So you cannot do this anymore. So, and it's not my own judgment, but Paul Krugman and other people that this largest country trade war continue for a year, then everybody will be hurt, the world economy will be hurt, very bad. So sometime soon, they should agree upon. And both countries want to get maximum concession from each other. And I think now U.S. is asking too much, and China says, I cannot only offer this much, then, you cannot have any agreement. But cautiously, people say that considering lots of potential damages, maybe these two gentlemen will make a broad agreement in last day of November, and then maybe then working level people to follow the other negotiations. So hopefully, at the end of this month, only 1 week or 10 days left, maybe we'll have a potentially good news so that we can come down, then maybe stock market, financial market, or foreign exchange market become much more stabilized. But this is our hope, but you never know what kind of characteristic President Trump has. They can kick this out, and I can agree, and he can escalate the environment much more severely, but in that way, maybe it can hurt the world and China, but also it can hurt its own economy badly. So we hope something must be done. Okay, last thing is, just summary of what I said. What about the future world trade governance? I'm saying this after all this kind of bilateral trade disputes, very unprecedented. And what can we do? And after all, maybe they agree upon to each other. Then what next? Then some system should govern not only bilateral things but also world trade activities. WTO is almost dead now; it's failing. So then you can say, okay, the WTO is dead. We don't need WTO, but that's not true. I mean, we have to go back to the basics. If you have a very good, very complicated problem, the basics is most important thing we have to think of. What is the basics for world trade? Multilateral trading system. So we have to go back to multilateral trading system, but not as it is. WTO has a huge, weak point. In other words, maybe I heard that you have 150 people altogether, roughly. Maybe similar size of WTO. And if I want to make a decision at the WTO, you all have to make a consensus. In other words, there are few people didn't come, it doesn't matter. It's not the unanimity. The people who are present in this room should not say no. If one person say no, then we cannot make a conclusion. Very democratic, very nice, but can you agree on anything? In the past, it's okay, but now you cannot agree on anything because China is big, Brazil is big, India is big, US is big, EU is big. I mean, all other countries are small, but you cannot say anything. You cannot have any conclusion using that kind of decision-making mechanism. So I'm not telling that all kind of suggestions should be made for WTO reforms, but the most serious thing is that consensus-based decision-making mechanism should be maintained, but also it should allow subgroups of the members to discuss something. It is now banned. I mean, whenever something happens, you all have to agree. You cannot do anything anymore. So WTO, in the past, it was possible. WTO should allow subgroups, those people, 20 people, 30 people, if they like, so-called like-minded people get together and discuss something and agree on something. And then they say, okay, we will extend this to you later. You have to do that kind of flexibility. Otherwise, WTO will not survive. Okay? So what I'm saying is here, after China, US, huge, sensitive trade dispute, next stage is to go back to the WTO system and rebuild the multilateral trading system. Actually, US is not doing it, but EU, they are making a lot of studies, trying to propose some kind of recommendations in Canada, Mexico, and Japan, Korea, so-called coalition of strong supporters of multilateral trading system. Without United States yet, but later maybe United States can come back. So we have to do this kind of preparation to strengthen, rebuild the multilateral trading system. Otherwise, world trade, also world economy, and the world financial market will be very much unstable. Okay, so we have to find some ways ahead, but it may take 2 or 3 years. Not tomorrow. We cannot say this. But reforming multilateral trading system is very important, and we should all make our own efforts to do that. And here I didn't want to go over, but in that activities, Korea should participate as a strong member, because Korea's economic policy is heavily dependent upon still global activities. And I told you CPTPP. Korea should join the CPTPP. I don't know whether this government is preparing in joining the CPTPP or not. But also, in our country, you are foreigners. You go to the market. Do you think our price level is good? No, very high, very expensive. You agree? I mean, the wine price, all kind of imported goods price. We had lots of FTAs, no tariffs on wine. But market price is very high. Why? Because our distribution system is still very much, complicated. So after distribution, they charge premiums. So consumers are not getting benefits. Consumers should be the strong supporters of FTA, but not true. So I think we have to do a lot of domestic reform so that consumers can feel that I got the benefit out of FTA. And lastly. There are certain sectors. This is a worldwide kind of issue, so-called losers. How do you do about losers? Losers means because of trade, some farmers, some industries, they lose their job. I mean, President Trump is exploiting by mobilizing that group for their political purposes. But every country has a weak sector, especially because of trade. They are not very competitive. And then government say, you are not capable of doing anything, so you should, you shouldn't work anymore. You cannot do this. So we call that the so-called inclusive, more detailed policy design to help those kind of young people who don't get a job because of trade. Then we have to move them to other industries so that they can work for more salaries and more working hours. So this is another very important aspect the Korean government is considering. Okay, I will stop my lecture here. I still have 5 to 7 minutes. So anybody who wants to ask any questions, anybody, any kind of questions, raise your hand. Then we provide the microphone and you can say something.
Hello. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for taking time to come talk to us today. I was happy that you mentioned that this is a good opportunity for small and medium-sized enterprises in Korea in terms of taking advantage of the FTAs that are going on and just capitalizing on those opportunities. And a lot of times, especially with OECD surveys, analyzing the challenges that Korea has in the international economy, a lot of things that they cite is that youth entrepreneurship and gender wage gaps and wage inequality is a big issue in Korea. I just wanted to know, I know you're specialized in trade policy, but what are some of the current policy initiatives regarding improving those kinds of areas in Korea today? And what the current government is doing in order to improve SME in entrepreneurship and opportunity to capitalize on these opportunities. Yeah.
Very, very, very important question. I want to also receive one more question, if somebody has. He's talking about the importance of small and medium-sized companies, especially in terms of entrepreneurship and how to enhance their capability of doing something globally. He said how government is helping. Any other person who want to ask any question?
Wow, let's see. Actually, I was a bit interested in the same kind of topic as this guy here asked you about. I think it's super interesting that you are focusing on the SMEs. But one thing that gotten over while I've been reading about Korea is that compared to other Asian countries, as you know, a small, medium enterprise from another country, it's quite hard to enter Korea if you compare it to, for example, Thailand or Singapore. I read, I don't know if you have that law anymore, but I read that there were one, for every foreign employee, you need 5 Korean employees when you start up in Korea. One thing that I can see as might be a big challenge is the language barriers. So how do you think that you could actually use this opportunity to invite foreign companies to develop in Korea, and how do you think, like, what could be the focus for you, since I don't know how to formulate this question, but like, what could the government do for foreign companies that want to enter Korea?
Yeah. So you're from also US?
No, from Sweden.
Sweden. You have a lot of small and medium-sized companies, right?
We do.
Very strong, global.
Yeah.
Well, these two questions are related and also very fundamental questions. And I think our government has been really thinking very hard how to help small and medium-sized companies. So every government, new government comes in, then first thing is that we want to help small and medium-sized companies. This government actually create a new ministry called Startup and Small and Medium-Sized Company, Ministry of Startup and Small and Medium-Sized Companies. So that's how Korea is emphasizing that kind of thing. But as I told you, historically, economic development of Korea for the last 50 years is led by government and big companies. If you go to Taiwan and Hong Kong, Singapore, they start with the small companies from the beginning. They open up for foreign investors. In Korea, to promote our own companies, we restrict imports, we restrict foreign direct investment for many, many years. So inside Korea, we have some kind of mindset, some kind of barrier, mental barrier, do not allow foreign things, to operate here, which is, competing with me. That kind of sentiment has been existing for such a long time. So still, our big companies, like top 3, top 5, top 30 countries are producing more than half of the GDP. This is really, it's not very, balanced, So we are emphasizing the role of Fair Trade Commission, competition policy, all kind of things, but still our whole history. So big companies there, who are the small companies? Small companies, these big companies admit, allow, or give them some kind of license. So you can provide something because you are good in making parts which will be supplied to my company. So these all small companies are all belong to the family of big companies. So, we have a Samsung, LG, all kind of thing. There are many small companies, but they don't want to be independent. They only want to supply their goods safely to the big companies. So there's no dynamic entrepreneurship is needed. Then after we call corporation companies for developing countries, for multinationals, except excluding all these kind of corporation companies in Korea, small and medium-sized companies, not many independent small and medium, even weaker, because how can you compete with existing corporation companies, existing big companies? So that's why we don't have any, still many years, many policies have been applied. We don't have any strong, independent, global small companies. So that's why we really want to emphasize to raise or promote small and medium-sized companies who are not directly connected to multinationals, so that they can become, so it may take some time, but we know the point, but it's very, very difficult. And also, independent small and medium-sized companies, nobody wants to work there. So we are now hiring foreign laborers. And as you said, the language problems also. So it's not easy, So college graduates, they are being unemployed. But many small and independent small and medium-sized companies, they're looking for, employees. Nobody go there. We have a huge mismatch. And for those kind of small and medium-sized companies, foreign laborers who are coming here to training, they are working in small companies. So even though government is working very hard to promote the small and medium-sized companies, but still we are having huge difficulties. But we know where we go, but it may take some time. But anyway, nice 2 questions. With this, I want to conclude my time with you at Korea University. Thank you very much for listening. Okay?